Humanity has long discussed just exactly what is out there in the woods. During our more vulnerable existence, when we had sticks and stones and maybe a hide shield to protect ourselves, other animals could be a real nuisance or even downright deadly. But there was something that scared man beyond our four-legged adversaries that roamed in the dark of the forest at night. These were more of a bipedal nature. All throughout human history have been stories of creatures possibly faster than man, taller, stronger, but more alarmingly, smarter. Our edge on this rock that propelled us to impossibly high status, all but securing this planet as our own, was our intelligence. It outclasses other animals' abilities by such a large margin that it's not even close. In fact, one of the interesting things that I heard recently is that if they play human voices out in the wilderness, even apex predators out there are scared of humans, and they're right to be scared of us, because we're awesome. Anyhow, so it stands to reason that it would terrify us if something actually matched us. To this end, the cryptids we tell stories of always appear to maintain some form of intellect that appears as though they are efficient hunters of man. But you also have to ask yourself, why do these stories always appear to have a common thread in them? In the events of the Watchers, deep within a forest in Ireland, a species would reside that not only could destroy man, but wanted to study them as well. But first I want to thank you guys for watching. If you enjoy, then leaving a like is greatly appreciated. It gets the video out there. Subscribing is a great way to stay up to date on when I post. If you want to suggest some videos like this, in fact, we watched this one at a watch party in my Discord. You can check the description for that. I'm also not streaming, but posting gaming videos over on Roanoke Games. Trying to get that off the ground. If anybody wants to take a look at that, it is greatly appreciated. All right, let's get back to it. As they would watch captured humans, the understanding was you would not survive once you ended up there. But what exactly is this species? What were its adaptations to man's aggressions? And could it be a lost form of hominid? Let's discuss that in today's episode, because really we all know what Homo sapiens does to other hominids. Just look at Neanderthals or tallies of the universe, I guess. So we kick off our story where there's a forest in West Ireland that draws in lost souls as a man starts running. No one knows exactly what's out there, as anyone who goes in doesn't come out, which kind of makes you wonder where the stories are coming from, doesn't it? As he runs past the point of no return, checking his watch, he's got about 22 minutes. Following the light, it's getting dark rather fast as the birds tweet faintly in the distance. Looking out, he comes across the same point of no return marker again, so he was completely turned around when he was running. Yeah, that sucks, bro. Looking up, birds start flying overhead as the forest starts getting dark. He begins trying to climb a tree to get out of there, because if it's good enough for other primates to escape danger, then it's probably good enough for us. A bird scares the crap out of him with a branch breaking as he falls down out of the tree. Looking at his pack, it appears as though he's pretty injured. He grabs a knife and gets ready to square up. Current objective, survive. Guttural chittering begins happening as he brandishes his knife, saying, "That's impossible," as he gets grabbed and dragged. Evidently it's pretty possible. Dragged into a hole in the ground, that is not an ideal situation. Jumping over to a lizard, we hear about how 70% of Ireland's trees have been cut down. Which brings us to today's sponsor, Established Scams. Anyhow, we meet Mina, who is vaping, she's inside of a pet store. You shouldn't be doing that inside. So she goes outside because the animals don't like it. If you vape indoors around animals that can't escape you, you're a giant nerd. The owner then brings her in to see if she can bring a bird to a zoo that takes about a day to get to. I don't know why. She agrees to take the bird there and then heads out back to her house. Heading back to her home, actually, she starts talking about how her mom died, and then the bird should also try not to die, which it does now, in fact, talk. Now it knows your mom died. Mina then gets ready to go out for the night as she puts on a wig. At the bar, a random dude meets up with her as she completely lies about her life, saying she's American and a ballerina. I don't think she's American, mainly because what we will see, unless her and her twin sister both ended up in Ireland, I kind of doubt it. And I don't think she's a ballerina. You know what? This mustache comes right off. Anyhow, to be a complete stranger at a bar, the next morning, after presumably getting some action, she tells Bird not to look at her like that, or herself, I'm not really sure which, as she begins her journey to the zoo. Expositioning the crap out of the bird, she then asks who he's running from. Wouldn't it technically be flying from? Yeah. Also, the bird's trapped in a cage. I don't think it's really supposed to be going anywhere. As Mina stops for gas, her sister then calls her to tell her, "Oh, you forgot about Mom's memorial." Like, I mean, I get it, right? But it's been like 15 years at this point. Things are bound to come up on that date in your life. Are you planning on having a memorial every year for like the rest of your life? Does that make me sound like a callous dork? Probably. Who knows though? That's the fun. Also, then her sister says like, it's been 15 years, you have to let it go. Bro, you're the one who's having a memorial over it 15 years later. Maybe you should let it go. So Mina keeps driving through the woods as the odometer reads almost 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Total missed opportunity in the movie. And then driving deep into the woods, I think you may have taken a wrong turn there, gal. The engine then starts going out as the music starts messing up with symbols appearing. Her phone also starts going out as the car completely dies. The bird tells her try not to die, as really, how did she think this was the road? She's in the middle of the forest, like quite literally. Let's freeze frame it real quick. Thank you, editor. There is clearly nothing that hints there's a road here. You kept driving into this area with it looking like that. I don't know how Ireland's road systems work, but that is clearly not how it goes, right? So checking a sign that says point of no return, looks like the engine was a bit overheated. She calls out as nobody answers because you're in the middle of the woods alone, and then turning back towards the car, it is now gone. Which, as we will find out, this is a bit strange, but of course given the electrical interference that we saw earlier with the symbols appearing on the radio, it's apparent there is some form of energy running in the area that does cause a person to hallucinate, which, is there any biological reality to back that up? Yes, there is, and we will absolutely be getting to that in a minute. Running back through the woods, well, the road is gone and you've been transported to the Shadow Realm. She calls the bird Darwin since it needs a name if they're just gonna meet their end anyhow, as other birds start flying through the forest. I can't tell if these are bats or crows. I'm pretty sure they're crows, but they come out at night, so I would have to assume they're bats. Anyways, Darwin is a fitting name, as you driving up here in the first place and ignoring the missing road is complete Darwinism. The ground then begins shaking as she looks out and sees something run by. Running after them, she sees an old woman who starts running away from her. Giving chase, she spots a building as the old woman starts counting down, telling her if she cares for her life, she will run. Entering what they call the coop, everything is bird themed. As she says, everyone here is lost just like them. Grabbing her, they say they will be very interested in someone new, as obviously she's a little confused. Lining up, the old lady says they're called the Watchers. Standing in front of the mirror, Daniel says they are there. Mina steps forward and she can hear something on the other side as they all start clapping for her. A very primate reaction. This has actually been noted in captive chimpanzees for a while. So she stands there, she starts having flashbacks to her mother as now it is day and the window opens up. She whispers to Darwin that they are leaving as she nopes out of there. The bird then tells her try not to die again as she heads towards where she thinks her car is. Looking back out, she spots a youngling in the distance as she begins trying to chase the sun out of there. Emerging at a peak, she looks around and sees, yeah, this might take a little longer to get out of there than she initially thought. The old woman now approaches saying, you're not the first to try to get out, probably not gonna be the last, but everyone has failed. She says the forest causes hallucinations, which I actually doubt it's the forest. I believe this to be a man-made issue, partially affecting naturally concerning elements. So I'm about to be a huge nerd with this, but it's just so perfect. Showing her the point of no return, it's a perfect circle around the coop, which is about a half day's journey out. Returning to the coop, Daniel's doing a performance as Mina asks what she's supposed to do. Everyone kind of just does their own thing. Acting, dancing, watching TV, the triple threat. Mina starts watching Lair of Love, as her life was always fairly boring. On the back of the DV also, it says it was property of a professor. The next morning, they have 10 hours and 2 minutes of sunlight. They go foraging in the woods with Ciara, telling Mina how her husband John should be coming back and how Daniel likes her. Mina then asks where John is, and Ciara says, well, he left like 6 days ago and hasn't come back yet. Yeah, I'm not sure he's coming back there, gal. Ciara then says that she thinks the Watchers watch because they're trying to see what drives a person insane. Ciara then brings Mina to a hole in the ground, saying that they are down there. Ciara says that she's been there about 5 months at this point, so not too long, and the old woman then tells Mina the rules as everyone else acts like a complete cult repeating it. Like, okay guys, it's a little weird there. Like, I get it, it keeps you alive, but y'all are like seriously drinking the Kool-Aid on this one. So with the rules set, as Mina watches Lair of Love for the 59th time, as I watch this through, there are several issues that I've kind of noted. First, food, sleeping arrangements, bathroom, water, where's all this coming from? We later see Daniel is hunting crows, but I still don't fully believe y'all are just surviving off a few birds and some berries that you find over a month's time. What about winter? Seems to be a few points here that are missing to explain their success concerning their ability to thrive here. So that night, as the Watchers rustle in the woods, Mina looks out at the mirror and then starts tapping on the glass. Putting her ear up to the glass, she hears growling and then goes to lay back down. She then starts hearing tapping on the glass as the thumping gets way louder and the old lady tells her to hold still. Daniel the next morning, again, is hunting crows as Mina follows him on his outing, and then she spots a youngling in the woods but does not give chase. These are important designations as it shows exactly what is happening in the explanation for why they're seeing things in the woods. She asks Daniel how long he's been there and then proceeds to ask if he's ever even seen a Watcher in the first place. She actually doesn't believe they're real. Mina then approaches a hole in the ground and says she's gonna go down there. She wants to know what they are as Daniel then just yells about the rules, like, look bro, rules are meant to be tested sometimes. The concept of this is how we've always done it is absolutely detrimental to humanity. Just think if we've never created a steam engine because the way we always did it was using animals to help us produce goods. So descending into the hole, phrasing, she looks around seeing a whole bunch of junk in the walls. Spotting a newspaper from 1992, she continues looking around finding old tech and eventually a bicycle. Having it hauled up, that leaves Mina down there for a moment as she looks back into a hole with something approaching and chittering. A hand with way too many fingers comes out and it starts burning as it gets close to her. So getting a look at the hand, we can assume a few things. First, a hand in this configuration would indicate that it is likely bipedal, given that the fingers are long. We do not see the palm of this hand, but if it is longer, that would mean then to some degree we also have a form of quadrupedal locomotion, much like a chimpanzee or gorilla might. The extra fingers are interesting, however, as technically speaking, at least for humanity, the dominant gene is to have 6 fingers and not 5. The fact that we have 5 is because it's just more prevalent that the recessive gene is passed on. However, the hand structure itself doesn't give too much information about it, but it does show it cannot move into the light without burning itself, indicating that this is a mostly subterranean species that incurs massive genetic damage should it move into the sunlight, given that apoptosis is occurring in the skin due to the ultraviolet radiation. This would be why this species only appears to come up at night, as otherwise they will meet their end during the day. So returning back to the coop, the old lady grabs Mina's arm and asks her if she saw something down there, like she's really interested. Oh, did you actually see something? I need to know. Like, peculiar, old lady. So Daniel begins talking about the power source under them running the TV, so there's like a field of influence, like wireless charging. And here, we start getting into Roanoke Gaming crackpot theory's trademark. So let's get into what I believe is happening here to induce these hallucinations. The human brain is a very delicate organ, so much so that a change in the environment can induce changes in how the brain operates in the first place. And to understand this change in the environment, we need to understand what a hallucination actually is in the first place. Specifically in this case, based on what we see in the eyes of Mina, this would be something known as a complex visual hallucination. This is not just some light or colors floating in and out of perception, but people actually forming and running away. For this to exist, there is a combination of multifactorial issues. Typically, all 3 will be at play. These are the brain's physical structure being influenced in some way, the biochemistry of the brain, and prior experiences. All of these will come together to cause you to see things. Now, the areas associated with visual hallucinations is the visual cortex. Specifically with elementary hallucinations, or simply basic visual hallucinations, that is known to affect Brodmann's area 17. Irritation or alteration in this area will cause objects to appear in the vision, or sometimes colors that aren't actually there. However, the complex form of visual hallucinations stem from irritation or alteration to Brodmann's 18th and 19th areas. This can result in hallucinations of faces, people, structures, pretty much anything that you've seen, because memory does play an important role in hallucinations. It's important to note, however, that I'm going to say hallucinations about 500 million times. These hallucinations vary in terms of how real they can look, and a person experiencing them can sometimes clearly understand that this is not real. However, some can be extremely convincing, but even still look out of place. Concerning Mina's hallucinations, this is clearly something having an impact on Brodmann's 18th and 19th area, and this would require the biochemistry of the brain itself to be affected. So let's set the table, so to speak, with this. Here we have an area of effect that ended up affecting the car's electrical ability, potentially frying the computer on the car, causing it to overheat for one reason or another, which could be as simple as the transmission overheating due to it no longer shifting properly, causing higher RPMs, leading to the radiator to be overwhelmed, leading to an overheat of the engine as a whole. This indicates there is some sort of electrical interference in this area. Given the TV is able to be powered without being plugged in, I do not believe that this is like just magic or something, but something as simple as electromagnetic induction, which basically sends electricity through the air. Think about it. The point of no return appears to be where the electromagnetic induction seems to halt, which is when the car entered this area. That's when it went out. But there is another indicator that this is also kind of what's happening. Electromagnetic induction is actually, as it sounds, electromagnetic in nature, and just to simplify it even further, this is wireless charging. I believe this hard line of point of no return where the hallucination starts is seen extremely early on when Mina wanders just a little deeper into the woods as she sees someone, and for that, you need to understand how magnets can affect the human brain. Known as a static magnetic field, they have been known to cause biochemical changes in the brain if strong enough. Essentially, there is interference with the neuronal functions concerning their excitability. Now, what does that mean? Basically, the brain enters a depressed state due to a high magnetic field because of the magnetic influences on the brain's electrical properties. In this way, we turn our attention to the ionic currents present in the cell membranes. This can cause charged cations and anions to not effectively move across the membrane, or just in general, it slows them down. To this end, the reason this causes hallucinations is as mentioned. It affects the biochemistry causing these hallucinations, at least visual ones, as the brain enters a depressed state of activity, which can in turn make you see things that aren't there. This would be reliant on a form of inductive electromagnetism that, as far as we know, we don't have that technology as of yet. Like, this is why the wireless chargers kind of suck. Like, you move your phone an inch away and it no longer charges, because it's also massively inefficient. But there is a way that this could possibly exist to affect humans and vehicles, increasing its potential distance that it can cross. Ireland is known for its high iron deposits, or at least at one point in time it was. Considering this forest is untouched, it could stand to reason that there are still high iron deposits within the soils below. By having this hypothesized inductive electromagnetism radiating electricity that can power a TV from the central building they reside in, this surrounding iron deposit could create a static magnetic field that would be quite powerful in the area, and it may end at the point of no return, allowing people's brains to return to normal functioning, causing the hallucinations to cease. I personally believe these experiences of seeing someone in the woods running away or losing your car are all caused by the building itself and the technology contained within. The iron serves to extend the field of influence by creating this powerful magnetic field all around them that has the ability to affect their brain's excitability. This area specifically would stand to make a great place for this to exist as well, and why these creatures are here and why man would choose it. So, setting up the TV and a camera outside, Daniel says the watchers should have been there by now. Looking outside, a pair of legs show up, and not just that, but a whole person too. It's John, Ciara's husband. The old lady asks if Mina broke any of the rules, as she says, "We cannot open the door or we will all die." She then asks where Mina went, and the old lady says, "Ciara, you need to ask your husband something that only he would know." She asks him what book that she was reading, and he doesn't know. And let me tell you, I would definitely be getting left outside. I have no idea what any woman that I've ever talked to at any point in time in history was reading, because I am just not going to commit that to memory. All of that space is remembering random biological facts for this channel. He then says to let him inside so that he can touch her. Okay, maybe that's not a normal human thing to say. He then starts saying, "Oh, they're coming," and she tells him to bend down so that she can see him, and he says, "Help me," as he gets dragged off. In the distance, we actually see one of these creatures crawling and then breaks the camera as they surround the building trying to get in. The old lady stands in front attempting to protect the group, as the next day the old lady throws the bike in the hole. Bike is also short for Bikel. She says that they will find another way out of there, as there is yelling and chittering in the hole as the bike is then grabbed and brought into the darkness. So while that's going on, Mina has flashbacks to being a youngling. Her mom was randomly like, "Oi, great day for a drive, isn't it?" As Mina has her hand out the window, and her mom tells her to roll it up and follow the rules. And look, again, I get it. Rules are important, and maybe it's just me having a problem with authority, but what a weird way to phrase it. So I remember back during like 2021, I was driving up to Maine for my honeymoon. Let's all take a moment to laugh at that, as I ran across a sign that I think it was like in New Jersey, and it said, "Do not disobey, follow the current virus orders or objectives," or whatever it was. Anyways, brother, just the phrasing of that, "do not disobey," made me want to start licking doorknobs in defiance. Like, granted, that would be completely idiotic, but you get my point. Like, sometimes there's just words that rustle your jimmies a little bit. Do not disobey. I don't know, man. Activates the almonds. So she copies her mom, like making fun of her, as her mom goes to roll up the window, which then traps her hands in the window, which made me laugh. And then the mother crashes the car. Mina now checks the areas as she starts marking trees when she's out foraging. The days are getting shorter and the cold is getting more intense. Winter is coming. Daniel and the old lady start arguing with each other more often as Mina covers the floor with drawings. Looking over after finishing one of her drawings, Ciara has left the building as she runs to go find her near the hole. Ciara says that she knows John is gone, and then they hear a yell as they see Daniel attacking the old lady. He says, "Our rules now," which, okay, what are your rules? Like, what? What are you talking about? Mina and the old lady then run back to the building as Daniel and Ciara are already in there, as they have locked them out. Ciara asks Daniel why he did this, as Mina and the old lady then hide their scent covered by the moss growth. If you could just cover your scent with moss, why didn't you just do that the whole time and then run out of there, like if you suspect that they were tracking your scent? So as they sit there, the watchers start moving overhead. Like, this moss really covered their scent. They could have just used this the whole time. Crawling towards the building though, one stands up, and it's a hominid for sure, but much more lithe than a human. It lets out a shriek as the rest start running out, at the building, all standing. Daniel and Ciara then stand there as Daniel yells out that they're not in here with us, as the other things are like, oh, okay, and then they start going to look for everybody else in the forest. The old lady and Mina now approach the building, realizing the Watchers are actively trying to hunt them. Mina launches into a diatribe about how her sister says she's not a good person, but Daniel is, and that his conscience will eat him alive if he leaves them out there. The old lady then grabs Daniel out there, let in, as then they all post up at the mirror. The old lady starts talking about how, I tried to protect you from the truth. I taught history and I came intentionally to this place. That's really, anyways. Then she saw one. She says she hunted alone back in the day. Very odd phrasing, the whole thing. So finding one of these things, she said she saw herself. It was longer and leaner than her. She says the Watchers are an ancient species. She thinks they're fairies. Oh God. Well, also changelings, I suppose, but she says they've lived out here and they are trying to copy humanity. That is why they watch them every night. As she tells them this though, the entire group's voices all start happening around the building as the fairies start calling out to them, mimicking them, which is not an ideal situation. So basically skinwalkers. Alright, so cutting into the story real quick, now that we have seen this species, what exactly is a fairy or a fae? A fae is a mythical creature that some are basically said to be magical, while others are said it's just any other type of animal that seems magical. To me, because I'm just a huge giant nerd and I am the way that I am, I'm inclined to believe that this is just a naturally occurring species that is not in fact magical, but existing within an area of the aforementioned technology. However, they are much stronger than man and appear to be carnivorous as well. As we will come to find out, they did not always appear as they are now, but instead have adapted as such. So as they start beating on the door, Ciara says that they're going to get in. They brace the metal door. Yeah, what about that giant glass window right there? I don't know, maybe the door is the least of your concerns. But as the carpet gets disturbed, they realize that there is something down there. So you're telling me, after all this time, after literally being here for over a year, they never thought to move the carpet a little just to see what could be down there or what it is, or maybe shake the carpet outside because it's dusty? That never happened? Bro, talk about not knowing your environment. So as Daniel sits there on the metal plate like an idiot trying to open it, even though he's on it, he starts hitting it, as then they pull back the plate with him off of it because they're like, Daniel, you have to get off of it first. See, Daniel is never the brightest bulb in the pack, as we will see later. Finding a hatch, they then open it as Mina descends with the bird and then the rest of the group as the Watchers break in. Turning on the lights, they find a bunker with food, gas, and electricity. Starting up the computer, there is no internet connection, but they find a video of the professor. He had an impenetrable fortress built to study the creatures in the woods. Clicking through the videos, the nights get worse for the professor as he realizes they are starting to get better at mimicking him. To build the structure, he would hire only 13 men at a time to work on the structure from neighboring towns and villages. No money or family was required. He would have them work for the day and then would enter his bunker in the evening and then leave them out there to the Watchers. Which you have to ask yourself, at what point would you start to run out of people to actually build this thing? Like, how many people could there possibly be in the surrounding neighborhood? Ireland does not appear that big of a place. Also, what a tool. Just let everyone get totally got, all in the pursuit of knowledge, he rationalizes. So next he mentions a little offspring with red hair. He says it has the power of duplication. He thinks these things could make people immortal. And he bases this idea on absolutely nothing from what I can tell. The next video shows one of these things in the corner of his bunker. Approaching it, it moves really fast. Like the fast twitch muscles in this creature are well beyond what humans can do. As it stands up though, it is much taller than man. Highly likely to be over 7 feet tall or roughly over 213.3 centimeters. It reaches out for him as it starts shrieking and climbing the wall. It will never be discussed how he got that thing in there. Fast forwarding to his last entry, he has apparently grown quite fond of the creature, and he says one bullet through its heart should do the trick for him and for it. He tells anyone who finds this how to get out of the woods and then go back to his office to destroy the evidence of this place. Climbing up the ladder, 2 shots ring out as Mina then cries. Why? Like, I genuinely don't know why she's crying. You didn't know the guy. Like, it was just a recording. Why are you crying? Anyways, she now says, oh, we'll leave tomorrow. So since it's their last night there, Ciara says she's gonna go to dance as she gets Daniel to dance with her. Trauma bonding, guaranteed to make a relationship last at least a few weeks. Daniel then starts talking about his drunk father breaking his nose as he goes and has a nice cry over it, and Ciara and Daniel now appear to be an item since John is out of the picture. It's only been a couple of months. Dang! Anyways, ascending to the next morning, the room is completely destroyed. These things went absolutely ham the night before. Heading outside, I feel like they could have definitely done this a little earlier in the day, as it looks like midday right now. Moving through the map and like finding the markings that Mina had made all throughout, the old lady keeps talking about how we're gonna move as one. Hitting the point of no return 134, they see a weird skeleton with wings. This is evidently what these Fae used to look like, but now they are a ground-bound organism like man, which do not fret, we will discuss their morphological changes here momentarily. Releasing the bird, it then flies through the woods towards assumedly the exit. Moving through, they then find a stone seal. You guys probably just need to keep running. Approaching it, the old lady says this is where the fairies were imprisoned. Evidently, they lived among men as gods, the bridge between nature and man, but the power of them frightened man, so the war between humanity and Fae began. And brother, were we stomping out some supernatural beings. And there is a reason for this, because humanity is undefeated on this rock. Humanity banished these things underground to prevent them from returning. The Fae could then claw their way towards the surface, but they lost their wings and changed, which is interesting. Why have wings in the first place? Obviously, that is a faster way to cover ground, but you also have to consider for a moment, the size of those wings would absolutely not be able to lift a human form of that size, so they would have to actually have hollow bones to make them lighter. That is the only way that these wings could ever possibly work. And even then, as like what would be an advantage of having wings versus just legs? Obviously movement, hunting abilities, pretty much everything under the sun. If we could fly, would be way better. Anyways, so let's highlight a few things. First, the war between man and Fae seemingly had only happened about in the last few thousand years, given the spears and shields we will see in a mural later, when man first came into contact with one of these things. I believe this site in particular to seal the Fae in was chosen because of its high iron content. Knowing that there were pockets of iron ore in the area, man would have known that the Fae would not have been able to dig through it, thus trapping them permanently or at least for an extremely long time. This, however, shouldn't have changed them as drastically as it did under normal conditions, which indicates something about them. First, I believe the Fae are a type of primate. Given their bodily structures, if they naturally evolved on Earth in the first place, which is like say that they're not aliens, this means that likely they belong to the genus Homo, but were separated some time ago. Given their extremely pale features and somewhat familiar but strange facial features, I would have to assume that they followed a similar pathway as Neanderthalensis. The out of Africa theory states that there were two major pushes for the genus Homo at different time periods. There was first Homo erectus, way before Homo sapiens, and this species migrated out of Africa for one reason or another, moving up into Europe and Asia. mRNA viruses were still quite common, and still are actually, and the result of this would basically be that Homo erectus would contract these illnesses that they were not familiar with, and they would fall out in droves. That has nothing to do with anything, but it's just interesting as it would kind of underline the Neanderthalensis ability to handle viruses a bit differently. Eventually, as erectus maintained a foothold in Europe, they would progress into Neanderthals. Well, let's back up for a moment just because it's fun and it's biology. There are actually two genes concerning Neanderthals. One causes the body to not react very strongly at all to viruses, allowing for the body to deal with the infection without overreacting and taking itself out. Interestingly, there is another gene from Neanderthal that causes the body to actually overreact to viruses, and this appears to be a leftover gene from erectus. Anyhow, prior to becoming Neanderthalensis and existing in this area, it appears that some would have moved further north, and it's important to remember that erectus was actually a fairly tall animal. It could be around 6'1" or about 185 centimeters. Whereas Neanderthals were much stronger, they were only around 5'5" or around 165 centimeters. If we apply the same concept that leads to deep sea gigantism, colder climates produce larger animals, as erectus continued living in a cooler climate, this being Ireland, it may be that they became wholly isolated, and as the planet entered an ice age, the species remained in the area and continued to get taller, but this growth would make them more lithe as muscle mass would not be added. Over time, this created a species I'm calling Homo forensis. That's right, on the spot. Man would come into contact with Neanderthals and then bang them out of existence before spreading even further north and coming into contact with forensis. Get it? Because it's like fairies, but also ensis. I don't know. I'm probably just as creative as all the other scientists who are not that creative. The paleness can easily be explained by the concept of Nordic people. They are rather pale, but they arose from sapiens, meaning that their lineage does have darker skin closer to our time frame now. A species that arose from erectus would have paled out more considerably, meaning that this is eventually what everyone from Norway is going to look like. Alright, maybe not that, but you get the point. Since there was no gene mixing with sapiens, this allowed for them to exist longer untouched by new genes that would have altered their morphology, thus allowing them to have an even more pronounced change. However, what's most interesting is given their rapid change underground, this kind of highlights something about their gene stability. It appears that forensis as a species is going to have epigenetics well beyond what we would experience. And epigenetics is essentially like the study of how an organism's environment and behaviors affect their genes. without changing the DNA sequence. So for instance, things like bodybuilding in humans can cause epigenetic changes in the DNA that regulate whether a gene is turned off or on, allowing for you to grow larger. The DNA itself, however, does not change. It's just how genes are expressed. And I believe that this is critical to understanding how they work in conjunction with sapiens. The gene expression that they have appears heavily influenced by the environment on an individual level. Given that they existed in a colder climate and grew larger than man, the gene expression allowed for them to exist as they did, which was in some ways to be quite visually appealing to sapiens, and probably also hollow bones and the development of wings. However, once forced underground, the species would manage to escape, but because of the time spent there, their genes stopped expressing gene-correcting factors of any type to resist the sun's radiation, which kind of creates a catch-22 situation for them. For them to adapt to the sun again, they have to go outside so their gene expression can relearn how to repair DNA and produce melanin to protect their genetic coding. However, if they actually do go out into the sun, they will burn to death. So this may be why they are trying to study man, because if they can express genes similar to how we do, then they can exist in the sunlight once more. Continuing their trek, Ciara is cold as Mina sees her and her sister running through the woods. It begins raining, as for some reason this means that they won't have time to make this. Why exactly? Which you may be wondering, okay, well, if they're out of the magnetic field, why exactly are they still hallucinating? It actually still does take time for your brain to recover from essentially being screwed with to this capacity from a strong magnetic field, so it's not an instant as soon as you leave this field of influence that you're good to go. It takes a little while, but supposedly there are no long-term effects that we know of. So anyways, the bats and or crows begin their flight as the Fae emerge from the ground for the night, giving chase. Emerging at the lake, which is the exit point, they have actually made it out. Daniel and Ciara then celebrate as Daniel is about to be an absolute idiot. Leaving him behind to free the boat, John evidently calls out to Daniel, and as he's dragging him out, Ciara calls out to him and he's like, "That's not John," because Daniel assumes it's John. Seriously, what an idiot. Like, he knows for a fact that these things can mimic everyone. And John just happens to be all the way out here for some reason, laying there. You just now found him after he got dragged off? Like, you gotta be joking, bro. So staying true to the name of the bird, he then gets his throat tore out because he went full moron. The rest of the Fae then appear, evidently not being able to handle the water for some reason, as they all take on the form of Daniel. Given how quickly these things change, I think it works a lot like how their form had changed when they were forced underground, they lost their wings. There is a choosing to change of how you look, and then there is a forced change like an actual adaptation. Choosing how they look would involve epigenetics and gene expression, whereas losing their ability to go in the sun hints that their DNA is actually not as stable as many other animals, and a more permanent change can happen, likely to create the foundation for gene expression to allow for such massive changes in their physical presentation. Whereas with humans, body size can change based on environmental factors given our genes are fairly stable. With forensis, their genes can also change, allowing for more profound gene expression changes, quite literally changing the finer details. So escaping by boat, they were pretty angry at this. Passing under a bridge, they wait for a bus to arrive as they hop on, as everyone just sort of looks at them. They're all Fae, except no, they're not really. Having escaped the forest, all's well that ends well, except it's not over yet. Mina says that she will go to the university tomorrow and destroy the evidence. Getting back into town, she heads home, probably fired from her job also, for not showing up for like several months. She takes a shower and then throws on her wig once more. No, she doesn't. Anyway, she remembers the car crash. Approaching her mom, her sister is sad, but really the mother should have been wearing her seatbelt. She's an adult. She should have known better. Just saying. So at the university the next day, Mina is allowed in his office, saying that this was her uncle. Apparently they left his office like this, even though it was like 2009 when he went missing, and it's supposed to be 2024 now, I think. So like almost, 15 years? Surely they would have repurposed his office at some point because he's been missing long enough. So checking through the desk, she then finds evidence that she needs, as then she gives it a nice listen. Evidently the Fae, when living with man, did so as guardians, friends, and occasionally somebody would clap Fae cheeks from time to time. And I need to know who that first guy was that was doing that, because that is someone who is super adventurous. So half human, half Faes were created. And this is why I believe the Fae species is not only related to the genus Homo, but that their genes must be somewhat stable, and most of their ability comes from gene expression because they have compatible genes with humanity. Sapiens was able to interbreed with Neanderthalensis back in the day and create viable young, which were able to reproduce. And this is why a lot of humans have genetic markers in our DNA from this event. With the Fae, their ability to accept sapien DNA and have it compatible enough to create viable young and a bloodline that could continue means that the young were not sterile. This would make the Fae closely related to humanity and allow for reproduction. And this is not such an easy task in most instances. In fact, ligers, being tigers and lions, while both are big cats, they produce sterile young, meaning a liger species cannot form out of this. However, a half-human, half-fae species could arise from this parents' union, which may be why the professor was talking about immortality. Interestingly though, how the Fae would take on a more human appearance in order to reproduce with humans is a bit strange. Like, they were trying to clap human cheeks. It's probably because a barn owl appearance was not something most humans would be down to clown with. I say most because at the end of the day, some adventurous sapien did decide to tag the walls with a Neanderthal girl and or vice versa. So allegedly, those lines are now extinct, but are they really? She then finds a mural of a man meeting a Fae, and these things, again, they look like barn owls. Truly, aliens better stay away from humans or someone is definitely gonna be looked at and be like, yeah, I'd hit it, tally best girl. Heading to Ciara's house next, I gotta tell you, that is a nice place. That brings up more questions of what does she do for a living? Entering the house, she then tells her about all the evidence that was there. She found pictures of the professor and realized that the old lady was with the professor. That was his wife, but the professor's wife had already passed in 2001. So the Fae took on her form, which is why the professor was so fond of it. Standing at the window, Mina then says the old lady will come as she finds a ton of cockroaches in the sink. Gross. Walking around the house, I mean, you could flip on a light or something, and as she does, a car approaches. Seeing Ciara get out of the car, well, you're trapped in the house of the Fae then, aren't you? And then says, I haven't got it quite right, but I will in time. Ciara then gets knocked out by John, as it tells her they were like gods once, and now it's angry over it. I mean, consider the following fairy tale thing. Get good and have a more ambitious species. Humanity didn't have to copy, it's a natural, homegrown way of life. Your species is trying to copy us. Get good, GG, easy. So as it continues worrying over how billions must Fae, or something like that, Mina does this whole thing like about how they were family basically, and it says, oh, you're really just kind of pets to me. That is some Invincible level nonsense. She says her name was Daywalker, the Deformity. She's half human, half Fae, so she was never truly accepted by the Fae, but her human genes corrected for the ability for her to go out into the sun without self-destructing. The old lady just wanted out, but then the professor tried to take her out. It then takes the form of Mina as it attacks her. And like, she keeps following her around, like the Fae is trying to leave, and she's like, oh, let me continue following you. And then starts trying to cut her as apparently it has her memories now. So this part, I don't know, it just seems a bit strange. This would seem to imply that to a degree, genes must be taken from the host, possibly through touching them or coming into contact with their genes. While it is generally accepted that genes cannot pass along memories, what I've always found fascinating is the idea that if you do get a heart transplant, you can actually start craving foods that the original donor liked to eat. Like, where does that desire come from? There's just so much we do not understand about our own existence and how our bodies operate, but that's really the only way I could see it really stealing any memories, is it has to be like a genetic memory. Mina then informs her as how she's able to stay in the daylight, which is apparently news to this thing, and she's like, you're half human, which explains why you never truly belonged. This starts altering her for some reason. Don't ask questions. She's just overwhelmed by the feels apparently. So because of this, her wings form once more, and she just kind of kept hers, nobody else did, then she blasts out the window, and then just sort of nopes out of there. Running back to Ciara, she wakes her up from her severe concussion, as then they hug it out. So back in town, Mina starts talking about her experience and how the Fae are still around, watching her. Sometimes it's an offspring. Sometimes it's herself. Maybe it's her twin sister across from her right now. That's a good way of saving on paying an actress, by the way. So as a bird flies up to the window, a creepy offspring watches from the road below as her face changes. And thus concludes The Watchers. You watched it, you can't unwatch it. But anyhow, I want to thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed, then leaving a like would be greatly appreciated, and subscribing is a great way to stay up to know when I post. I'll drop my Twitter, Discord, Patreon, and Roanoke Tales channel link, where speaking of patrons, I'd like to thank mine real quick. First, I'd like to thank our astrophysicist, Death's Dancer, and Feather. Thank you very much for your support. Next, I'd like to thank our scientists, Argent Sentinel, Dakota 23, Lucian Dragon, Metric System, and Trash Panda in a Trench Coat. Thank you guys as well. And to the rest of my patrons, y'all are greatly appreciated and absolute ballers. But, alright, that's gonna do it for me. I hope everyone enjoyed, and I will see y'all in the next one.